We're here today with a Moneybox Masterclass, all about the new tax year and how to make the most of it. I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Georgie Frost. Georgie, there is absolutely no way I could possibly do justice to all of your career and achievements. So for anyone that's not familiar with your work, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the Moneybox audience?
Ryan, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me. Yes, I'm a financial broadcaster and journalist, editor-at-large at Times Money Mentor. I do the This Is Money podcast and all sorts of other things. I go on the BBC and Times Radio and those sorts of things.
There's a tendency to assume that anybody that works in the personal finance space is great with money today and has always been great with money. I know from my own personal experience that is absolutely not the case. But how did you feel about money growing up? What was your money habits when you were younger? And was there anything that you learned kind of either positive or negative from your family about money? Because these things get instilled into us very young.
So I'm really glad that you've asked this question. But first of all, what I'll say is now I wouldn't consider myself particularly great with money. Just because we know the rules, as it were, it doesn't mean we're not susceptible. Retail therapy is a thing, and I am as susceptible as anybody else to it. So first of all, I wouldn't say I'm great. But the first piece of advice I'd give to anyone, and we can dig more into this, is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Finally, we're getting the fact that money isn't just about pounds and pence or anything like that. It is so emotionally connected. There is so much going on in our personalities, our backgrounds, that can influence the financial decisions we make today, even if we don't realize it. So it wasn't until I became a financial journalist that I really started looking at my behavior with money. When we think about sort of bad habits, as it were, with money, I mean, I learned lots of good habits, I'm sure, from my parents, but we focus on overspending. But actually, one bad habit you can have, and I sadly don't have this one, but is underspending, is not enjoying money. People squirreling away, and then never getting to use their money. So it's a real fine balance of, what your attitude to money is. And if we're going to go sort of really deep about relationships, it's one of the biggest causes of people breaking up is this, not so much you don't have enough money, it's about having a difference of views about money. That doesn't mean that if one of you's a spender, one of you's a saver, you shouldn't be together. But what it does highlight is you need to talk about money.
Well, I think we, and you're like firmly responsible for the progress that we've made here via the work that you do, are slowly breaking down these taboos about money, and we are talking about it more as a society. Probably still not enough. But the kind of original question was around, people seem to think being good with money, in inverted commas, is something that's innate with you. You're either good with money or you're not so good with money. And that, again, I just don't feel that that's the case. Like, for example, when I was starting off in my career and I was doing my financial advice exams, I was advising clients on like multi-million pound portfolios, all the while sticking my own head in the sand about my pension, because generally speaking, people don't want to think about their pension in their 20s. And I was one of those people. So I'm sure you get this via the line of work that you're in, but people will ask you questions about saving, investing, pensions, and they will think that you're innately good with money. Actually, it's more of a learned skill. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it does. I think also people are one thing I've noticed that people are better with money than they really give themselves credit for. Absolutely. And I would say especially women in this. I hear it a lot. Oh, I'm no good with this. I'm no good with money. And actually you look at what they're doing and you think, well, you're not doing too badly. And this goes back to, defining what is good for you. Okay, just because you're not saving every single last penny into a savings account and then investing what you've got doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong. You are also enjoying money. So it's about understanding the value of money and what it means for you as well. And actually, the value of saving, the value of investing is all about, for me, it's about freedom. But I also want to enjoy the money I get. Yeah. Like, life is for living, ultimately.
And on the point there where you say people say to you, oh, I'm not good with money, I feel that can be a self-perpetuating thing. Because if you feel that you're not good with money, and we'll come on to confidence around financial decisions in a minute, but if you feel you're not good with money, it's very easy, as I did in my 20s, to bury your head in the sand about it. And therefore, year after year goes by and your confidence with money actually doesn't improve because you're kind of too worried to actually dedicate the time to it. So we need to find something that kind of breaks that cycle.
I think we live in a world where we almost want to jump the process. Of course we do. We all want to be excellent at everything. We want to be super confident. But one thing I've learned through my life is actually true confidence is built through experience. And sometimes you're going to get things wrong. Oftentimes you're going to get things wrong, but you'll learn as you go on. So again, the second big tip that I will say to someone is, whatever you do, just get started.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the greatest thing in the world. Whatever you're doing doesn't have to be perfect right off the bat. But once you've got started, then you can start building and learning and growing. And confidence comes, as I said, from experience and from educating yourself. If you are constantly saying, oh, I'm no good with money, then you're never gonna, you see an article in a newspaper or, something on your website, your eyes are gonna glaze over and you're not gonna bother reading it. So it's about engagement and feeling like, actually, I'm learning. Every little new piece of thing that you do, every mistake you make is a learning experience. And if we flip the narratives in our head about that, opens up a world of possibilities.
I couldn't agree more. And I often get asked for tips about money, about saving, about investing. And I think what people are hoping for or expecting in that is a stock tip that's going to double their money or whatever it might be, crypto and I think sometimes they're a little disappointed with my response, which is you need to be spending 30 minutes a week on something to do with money. Something to do with it. It doesn't matter what that is. It can be listening to a podcast. It can be finding a blog that you find interesting and subscribe to. It can be, okay, I've heard about an ISA. I'm going to spend 30 minutes this weekend figuring out what an ISA is. And it's that education and engagement piece that is so important. And if you get into a regular habit about that, that's 26 hours a year, and suddenly you will feel so much more confident.
I hugely agree with you, but I am far more lazy than you are. So I would say, if you're the sort of person who gets a bit intimidated by the idea of 30 minutes of what feels a bit like, actually just having a conversation with someone about money, just opening up, anything that gets you engaged. Don't think of it as, if you're like me, if you're like you and you're good at studying, then, go ahead, set yourself a little timer and all sorts of things. But no, for me, it's just saying, like, any kind of immersion in this subject, anything that makes me feel like I'm stepping forward. But I also think that, again, when I talk about the narrative, we're so focused on pension, mortgage, all of this terminology, which, let's be honest, bore. But actually, if you think of it in a flip way of saying, it's a place to live.
Yeah.
It's about, if I'm stuck in a job, I can't stand my boss. Do I have enough money that can just see me through to quit, to storm into that office, put the thing down and storm out again, and feel good about myself and say, yeah, I have enough to have that freedom, that independence, the choices. That's what money gives you, is choice. And if you start thinking of it in that way, it doesn't feel like such a chore, does it?
No, I agree. And when it comes to pension and retirement, as you say, as soon as you say that to people, their eyes completely glaze over. And typically speaking, when the industry has talked about pension or retirement, it's pictures of people on a boat, sometimes on a bike, usually grey hair, cycling, all happy. And whenever we do pension or retirement content for Moneybox customers, I emphasize that choice element. And it's whatever you want your future life to be. And we'll talk about this when we come on to the new tax year stuff. But there are tools out there to help you save up that money. As you say, it's not about the money itself. It's about the choices that it gives you. So speaking of things that people are good at, generally speaking, people in the UK, very good at saving, potentially not so good at investing. Does that resonate with you with the questions that you get to your podcast?
So interestingly, the questions that we get asked in the podcast or at the Times are around investing. And I suppose this isn't strange, actually, because that's probably the area that people want the most information on. Oftentimes, like you say, people want that silver bullet, what stock shall I pick, etc. In terms of savings, what we're noticing is the most read articles are about savings,
Okay.
savings rates, etc. So people are really, really engaged in savings, getting the best savings rate, etc., the questions they want to know are about investing, is what I notice. So how I think about the two splits is, it goes back to the difference is saving and investing is your time horizon. If you are sort of wanting to go on a really lovely, amazing, let's say, honeymoon or a holiday, if you're wanting to buy a house in the next 5 years, then obviously you would think about saving your money in cash. Anything longer term, then you think about investing that money so it works harder for you, and because it can ride out all the bumps in the market. I started investing when I downloaded the Moneybox app. I'm reluctant to say that because it sounds like an advert, but it's not. It's the truth. In 2017, I was presenting a financial radio show every day. And obviously, I'd become aware of Moneybox, and I thought this sounds very cool. But I had no savings. I had never invested before, barely got a pension. I hadn't bought a house. So, in terms of doing things the wrong way around, I did it the wrong way around. But what it did, I was really attracted to just the roundup. There are other apps you can use, but, I particularly like Moneybox. So it was only a year after I think you launched. And it was just that if I feel flush enough to spend £2.50, when coffees were £2.50, on a coffee, then I can spend the extra 50p putting into a vesting account. I didn't even think about it. And I think that's a great way to get started when it comes to investing, is just having that mindset that, actually, it's that easy. It doesn't have to take huge amounts of money. And of course, at the same time, I then built up my savings account. And when is the best time to start investing? Well, it was when you were young, but then it's today. But, as early as you can to see your money grow, even if it's just little amounts, can make such an enormous amount of difference.
We did actually have a piece of research just only a couple of weeks ago that showed that people in the UK are becoming slightly more confident investors, particularly younger people as well. So perhaps there is a little bit of hope there that things are gradually improving over time.
Yeah, look, savings has its place, and I really hope that we don't think, throw the baby out with the bathwater and trying to get everyone investing. Look, if you are coming close to retirement, then maybe it makes sense for you to have, your money in cash. If you don't have that emergency savings pot or any emergency, it absolutely has its place alongside investing. So let's make that absolutely clear. But yes, I do think, when you look at other countries that have a much more ingrained culture, the US, Germany, etc., in terms of investing, then we are way off. But I think that this goes to an education play. I think potentially the government could do more, businesses could do more, perhaps have some payroll investing scheme. This is probably above my pay grade right now to start discussing policies and business sort of ideas. But, I do think that we are getting there. And I think companies like Moneybox, and there are plenty out there that are not just offering a service, but are offering some really, really interesting articles and information, I think is vital. Things are changing. The government's desperate to get us to invest. I'm not sure their methods at the moment will work, or what's being mooted that might happen, certainly with cash ISAs. However, I think even talking about it is, getting people engaged in the subject. But I still think there are lots of barriers to entry, that, real or not, that need to get broken down.
Well, it sounds like to me you're exactly the type of person that the government should be talking to about policy to get people saving and investing. So back on the educational side of things, we're talking at the start of the new tax year, one of the most important times in the calendar for people and their money. So let's talk about how people can really use it to their advantage. But first of all, what is the tax year and why is it important?
Because there are lots of changes that happen in the new tax year with certain things. So, for example, let's take a look at ISAs. So everybody gets a £20,000 limit in which you can save into an ISA, unless it's a junior ISA, and then it's £9,000. And it's a use it or lose it. So as soon as we hit that midnight on the 6th of April, that weird date in the sort of middle of the year, the clock starts again. Now, that may seem like a lot of money, 20,000, but, it is, use as much as you can of that allowance, especially with the fact that, more of if your savings are outside of a tax efficient vehicle like an ISA, more people are getting stung for for tax on their interest. So, and the same with stocks and shares ISAs as well, of course. Pensions. Now, pensions are slightly different. You can put 60,000 a year. You do have 3 years where you can put in any sort of used allowance in. So you have a bit of a 3-year gap, and that's still quite a lot, 60,000. I'd love to put 60,000 into a pension. But, again, but there's a benefit to putting more money into your pension that's beyond just saving into your pension, which is a fantastic thing to do. Because of lots of different reasons, the government tax relief and all sorts of things, and you might get employer contributions as well. But there's a couple of other issues. We have some weird thresholds in this country. So if you earn over £100,000, you start losing your personal allowance. Child benefit, if you start earning over £60,000 as an individual, you start losing your benefits. So if you can add a little bit more into your pension, you can lower your income essentially and keep under those thresholds. So there is another element to putting money into your pension that is more than just that. And then, of course, you've got capital gains and you've got dividends and all sorts of things that change at this weird time of year from the 5th to the 6th. So that's why you need to think about it.
And it's the use it or lose it nature that makes it so important.
With ISAs, absolutely, absolutely. It is the clock starts again, so as much as you can fit in. And look, while 20,000, sounds a huge amount of money, or let's say you're saving into a lifetime ISA. I saved into a lifetime ISA to buy my first home. That's only £4,000. So, again, another use it or lose it. If you put 4,000, the government will top it up by £1,000 or 25% bonus. So, that's something that you need to think about as well, because the clock starts over again on the 6th of April.
And if we're talking about the start of the new tax year, I think you mentioned a really important point there of sometimes these allowances can seem quite big and potentially unachievable. But if you break them down to monthly or weekly, they suddenly become a lot less scary. So the lifetime ISA, for example, is a £4,000 limit. If you break that down to weekly, I think it's just under £77 a week, which is a little less scary. And probably when I'm speaking to people about the new tax year, it's just about trying to take as much advantage of these products that are out there as possible and trying to match them to your financial goals. You referenced it a couple of minutes ago of really the first step about any financial plan or getting confident with money is just working out what your money is for. It can be very easy. We're all extremely busy. It can be very easy to just bury your head in the sand, go to work, get paycheck to paycheck, and keep not really thinking about why you're doing these things. So I always impress upon people, figure out what your money is for, what is your primary financial goal, and then it makes it a lot easier to choose which type of ISA or which pension or whatever account might help you get there a bit quicker. But the other thing that we've seen actually with the lifetime ISA is the habits that it gets people into. So the government bonus is paid out on a monthly basis, and we see customers just absolutely love that. They will see the government bonus get paid out, they will log in, they will check their balance, and they may set up kind of recurring deposits going forward. And we've seen via surveys that it's made people more confident with their savings and instilled better savings habits in them long after they've finished using the lifetime ISA. Let's not overlook the fact that it's still a very difficult environment to save in. The cost of living crisis hasn't suddenly just disappeared. But what I do say to people is once you've worked out your financial goal, there is a incentivized product out there for you, essentially, regardless of what your financial goal might be. So if you're looking to build up an emergency fund, for example, you can have a look at cash ISAs. If you're trying to get onto the property ladder, you've got the lifetime ISAs. If you want to just build wealth for the future, stocks and shares ISA. And then when you talk about retirement, you've got pensions, which we could spend all day talking about. But there are tools out there to help accelerate you towards your financial goals. And it is not just you alone that is saving towards this. As I say, the government wants you to hit your financial goals and build your own financial security and wealth. So there's things out there to help you get there.
And I would also say, know thyself, right? I think that's really important. If there are ways that you can hack your brain, do it. So, for example, we always say, on payday, set up a direct debit that just goes straight out of your bank into a safe so you don't even feel the loss. Every time you get a pay rise, put a little bit more of a percentage into your pension. Little things like that just feel that you don't know that you're saving. Another big one I would say for me is never ever allow a store to save your bank details when you go shopping online. Don't do it. But it's things like that. If you know you're the sort of person, let's say, that midnight shops, when you can't sleep, put your phone away. It's working out who you are, how you respond to things, and then just trying to hack. And I have to say, the fintech revolution, the sort of technology that we've got nowadays is so brilliant for helping us to make it feel effortless to save and invest. So hat tip to the good work that's being done there. Still loads more. And there's still loads more that we can personally do. So this is not like just saying government needs to sort it out. Businesses, we need to take responsibility for our own future. Absolutely. But it is so much easier with apps now that can tell us where we're spending. You don't have to draw up a spreadsheet. Oh, I couldn't think of anything worse. Because it's all there for you on your banking app, etc. So it's easier than ever to do any of these things. And just very quickly going back to the investing piece as to why people are saving more than they're investing, and all this speculation about cash ISAs and lowering the limit to try and encourage us. We know that if we lower the limit from 20,000 to, let's say, 4,000, people are not going to use that extra money to invest. They will just put it into a savings product that they will probably have to pay tax on, right? So that it's not, punishment is probably not the best way to get people investing. Or the best way to get people investing, we've said it already, it's education. I think it's empowerment. It's really flipping the narrative and saying, this is what it gives you. It's not just it's not about, I know it feels difficult right now in a cost of living crisis. But if you go, don't focus on the negative of what you're losing now. Focus on what you're gaining in the future. So it's always about flipping the narrative, feeling confident about your money, educating yourself. And there are things that schools can do, but there are things that companies can do, journalists can do, just getting this on people talking about it, and then just talking about it with your friends and those sorts of things. I just think it's once we've broken down that sort of those barriers around investing. I'm not intelligent enough, big one. I don't have the time. That's something I say. I don't have the money. There's a belief that you have to be super rich. I don't look like the type of people that invest. Well, what's the type of people that invest? I invest, you invest, mates invest. And going back to the fact that you've got tools now that make it just so easy that you can, invest money for as little as to £10 a month or whatever it is. And you don't even have to think about it. Just pick your risk level, off you go. Carry on with your life.
It comes back to your point about learning by doing, right?
Yeah.
In terms of it, breaking down that last barrier of just getting started and realizing that investing is nowhere near as scary as you might think it is. You have dropped so many pearls of wisdom into the conversation today that our Moneybox audience are going to be delighted to hear. If you could go back and just give one of those to your younger self, if we go back to...
She wouldn't listen. She wouldn't. Look, I'm very briefly, before I became a financial journalist, as I said, I was a sports journalist. But while I was a sports journalist, I had a major back injury. And I couldn't work for about a year. I got into debt. So if anybody's listening or watching this and thinking, I am in the absolute doldrums, I can't even think about investing or saving, it gets better. I've been there. And it takes time. But all I will say is, as I said, think about flipping the narrative. Think about what this money could mean to you in the future. Think about where you could possibly make some sort of changes to your lifestyle. But the most important thing is, don't beat yourself up. If you don't feel that right now you are in a position where you can do that, okay. And we said this during, lockdown, when people were taking their money out of stopping paying auto enrollment, etc. Okay. I don't know your life, so I can't possibly make decisions for people on what they could do. But write that list. Keep it there. Keep it in your brain and keep thinking about it so that as soon as you are in a position to start, get started. Open that lifetime ISA just with £1. Download the app. First step. Just take that first step, but never beat yourself up about doing something wrong. It's a learning process. I'm still learning every day. I've learned from this conversation. I will still be educating myself hopefully until my very, very latter years, and then thinking, I wish I'd done that. But you know what? Fine. You blew money on a great holiday. I went to the Galapagos. I spent a lot of money on it. Great. Life is there to enjoy yourself as well. That's another thing I would say. So lots of stuff in there, but she would never have listened anyway because she was so precocious. But that's what I would say.
I can't possibly think of a better thing to finish on. So thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for coming into this Moneybox Masterclass, Georgie. It's been fantastic to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.